So what if financial success wasn't about what you did, but it was about what you didn't do? So today we're talking about the one simple rule, or something, maybe a not to-do list, that has turned countless millionaires into paupers, and we'll talk about that. And then it's also turned one specific janitor into a multimillionaire. So hey, we are Bob and Linda Lotich, the authors of Simple Money, Rich Life, and you are listening to the SeedTime Money podcast. And we're in the middle of a year-long series where we are sharing our 40-week checklist of all the action steps, strategies, and biblical insights that we use to go from being super broke, paycheck to paycheck living, to reaching one of our most meaningful financial goals of being able to give away $1 million by age 40 and really living a life of true financial freedom. And so today what we're talking about is this idea of how do we create a list of things not to do, and really one specific thing that if we just don't do this, it all but guarantees some level of financial success.
Yes. What is it? Charlie Munger said, it wasn't that I made a lot of good decisions. It was just the avoidance of stupidity.
Yeah.
This feels like that to me.
Yeah, it is. And it's
the avoidance of stupidity.
In some ways, a common sense thing.
Right.
But, like Linda and I were talking about before the episode, there's oftentimes things that are common sense that it's like, oh, I know that. But the question isn't, do you know it? Are you doing it?
Are you applying it? Right. Oh, and I was even talking about myself, is that this is something that I actually didn't know before I knew it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And even though it is common sense and it makes a lot of sense once you hear it, I guess I just want to speak to anybody who's listening that is like, that makes sense now.
Yeah.
Because there's no shame before you learn something, you just don't know beforehand, right?
But and if we were all, taught, had 8 years of financial education while going to grade school and high school, like this wouldn't be an issue. Like, just like brushing your teeth or whatever the thing is. But the fact of the matter is, I didn't have that growing up.
Yeah.
Most people I talk to didn't. There's some people who actually have some decent financial education growing up, but so often I hear people say, my parents just never talked about money. And it's like, well, how are you going to learn?
Yeah.
And so everybody's trying to figure this out on their own.
So that's why this one, it is worth talking about, and it is worth repeating, because if you're not doing it, it is just the first thing you can do where you're going to see a huge change.
Yeah, and it's not only not doing it, it is also, so there is a black and white component of either you're doing it or not, but there's also the way of looking at it like, well, how well am I doing it? Because even if you're doing it, you can do it better and move forward faster.
Right.
Okay, so before we get to the that we're talking about, I want to ask you a question that we ask all of our students in our True Financial Freedom class, which you've probably heard us talk about 1,000 times. You've been listening to the podcast. But if you're new here, basically it is a 6-week class that we are hosting in different churches and small groups. And so if you'd like to bring it into your small group, let us know. And we'd love to talk to you about details of how to do that. But the question that we ask our students is this simple question here. How much do you need to earn to never have any money worries again? Okay, so kind of evaluating how much do you currently earn, and it's like, oh, if you got a $50,000 a year raise, like, is that the amount where you're like, man, I just don't think we'd have any money worries? Or let's say it was 100,000, like, how much do you need to earn? Because I remember when I was making 35,000, I thought, man, if I made 50 grand a year, like, I would have no money worries.
I would be rolling
ever.
in it. Yeah.
And then like 6 figures, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine how it would be like to have that much money. And,
right.
And as anyone listening knows who's worked for any amount of time and has seen your salary increase, that that's a moving goalpost.
Right.
Because once you hit 50,000, it's like, man, that still feels kind of tight.
Right.
Let's get up to 100,000, or maybe let's get whatever the thing is. But the point is, that's my challenge to you. What is that question? What's the answer to that question for you? Okay, so I want you to take just a minute and again, think through this a little bit. And what is that dollar amount for you? And not like, don't just throw out a random number like $10 million or whatever, because of course, yes, fine, sure. But I want to know what's the smallest amount that you would need to be at that point. You're like, I just don't think I'd have any money worries again. Like everything would be taken care of. Everything would be solved.
Right.
That's the question we're asking. Okay. Now, hopefully by now you have some number rolling around in your brain. Now, when we talk to our students, we've done this somewhere from 8 to 10 times live with students and been able to hear their number, hear their feedback.
Yeah.
And in the numbers, I would say probably average somewhere from $200,000 to $300,000.
Sure.
So there's some people who it's like 100,000 would be great, and then there's occasionally someone who's like $1 million. I need $1 million.
$2 million. Yeah, we're like, okay.
I'm like, okay, great. If that's what you need.
That's fine.
But the average, if I had to average, I would say somewhere to $200,000 to $250,000. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I want to go to a little story of one of the greatest boxers of all time, Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson.
Okay, and so you might know a little bit of Mike Tyson's story, but what's interesting about Mike is Mike in the 90s, when he was just the guy, he earned over $400 million over that decade.
400. I mean, isn't it like some people think it was more than that?
Yeah.
Like nobody's really sure how much.
Estimated, yeah. It was actually 400 to 600 or something. Like
I thought I heard 700 at some point. But yes, either way, tons of money that I can't even wrap my brain around.
Millions
honestly.
with a couple zeros,
right.
you know? So it's a lot of money. He earned a whole lot of money. And what's interesting about Mike is that by the year 2003, not only had he blown all of it, all 400 million, but he actually went an extra 23 million beyond. So in 2003, he had a negative $23 million AUM, as we would say. And what I think is so fascinating about this, or like the first time I heard this and realized this, it's like, okay, this proves the point that a high income does not equal a high AUM. Because this guy made $400 million over the course of less than a decade, honestly.
Right.
And had zero, way below zero to show for it. So it can't be that just having a high income is the answer to increasing your AUM. Okay. Now, oftentimes, I think we think, well, he's just done with money.
Absolutely, and that I would never ever.
That yes, if the Lord blessed me with $400 million,
I would
manage it so much better.
So good with it.
And I think it's easy to think that, but here's the deal: like Mike isn't an anomaly. Okay, so what's really interesting to me, I found this article on CNBC. Okay, so this isn't some random, blog from who knows what saying whatever. Like this is CNBC, somewhat respectable news site.
Yes, okay.
And here's what they said. They said an estimated 60% of former NBA players go broke within 5 years of retiring.
Oh my gosh.
60%. That is more than half of the players in the NBA are broke 5 years after they get out of the league. Okay, that's crazy. Okay, but it's even worse in the NFL. It said a reported 78% of former NFL players have gone bankrupt or under financial stress just 2 years after retirement.
2 years.
So here, it's nearly 80%. So that's 4 out of 5 players in the NFL.
Wow.
So you can look down at the field, see all the players on the field, and you're going to have about 6 of them who are going to be in decent financial shape after they retire. Like, it's just crazy to think about. And so, again, all these people, and so many of them making millions of dollars a year with all that money at their disposal are still a financial mess. And yet so many of us go to bed each night just thinking that if we just had a little bit more,
just a little more,
all our money worries would be gone.
Yeah.
If we just made $250,000, if we just made $1 million, all our money worries would be gone. And the truth is, it is less about what you earn and it is more about what you do with it.
Yeah.
It's less about what you earn and more about what you do with it, okay?
Yep. It's good.
So,
anyway. A good reminder.
So out of all of this, and years ago, we kind of had this revelation that when we looked back at our financial life, trying to figure out why we were such a mess in our early years, and I think we identified that we were doing the exact same thing that all of the, Tyson and the NFL and NBA players are doing, which is spending more than 100% of our income. Fundamentally, that's it. It's really that simple. And we were doing the same thing. We just had smaller numbers, but that was the thing that was holding us back financially, was that we were spending all of the income that we had and then beyond. And so we were adding more to a credit card, which is just pulling us down even more, okay? And so out of that, we realized, okay, we need some way to create a rule to prevent us from doing this.
Yeah.
Okay, so the rule that we created for ourselves is what we call the Never 100 rule. which was basically that we would never spend 100% of our income in a given month. Okay, so that means no adding to a credit card balance for one, but it also means, if we only earn $1,000 in a given month, we're not going to spend $1,000. Okay. And we're not going to spend $1,500 by adding $500 to a credit card. We're going to figure out how to make it work on the $1,000. Okay. Now that's an extreme example. But the point that I'm trying to make is that whether it was $10,000 in a month, $1,000 or even $100 a month, we were not going to spend all of it.
Yeah.
Okay. And I say this as this was what we have tried to do to the absolute best of our ability. This isn't we have done this perfect every single month forever, but this is what we have strove to do.
Striven.
Strived.
Right.
Is,
Stroven.
Something. Yeah. We're hearing a lot of interesting words from our 10 and 7-year-old. Yes. So they're rubbing off on us.
Yeah, but I mean, what happened to me? I mean, I spent probably about 150% of my income.
Like before we got married.
It's okay to laugh at that. Yeah, it's before we were married. And the way it would happen for me is I would get paid, and then I would get paid every 2 weeks about, and I would go spend all of that money in the first week. And then I would go, I've spent a lot of money. I need to cut back. And so I would go by what felt like I was cutting back. Like I would just go eat out at lunch like every other day instead of every day, or I would only get one Starbucks in the morning instead of like 2 or 3. And so I mean, you have to think back. This was like back when I was living at my parents' house without any bills, but I was just racking up this debt because I couldn't figure out how to not spend. And it was also something that I was like, this was the time in my life where I was like, I didn't realize I was just supposed to not spend it all. Like, I know that sounds a little bit ditzy or whatever, but it was just, I had never put the pieces together.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where it was like, once somebody said it, was like, that makes sense. It wasn't that I couldn't get, it was just that I was not putting those things together.
Yeah.
But that, I'm just going to see, just try to cut back. Just was not working. Like I needed to be looking at what was going on. And that was my big problem.
Yeah. So the reason behind all this, the reason for doing this, it isn't just to like throw a difficult challenge in front of you and just something difficult to do. But the point is that we want to do the most important things first. And so for us as Christians and as followers of Jesus, like we really believe that giving should be one of the highest priorities. So when the money comes in, that should be the first thing that we do. Okay. And so if we spend 100% of what comes in, then that can't happen. Now, on the other hand, if we don't, and especially if we're intentional about those most important things and make those the first things that we do, that it's a forcing function that allows us to make sure that we do those priorities. So for us, it's giving, it's saving some, and investing some. And in that way, we can, if we only spend 90% of our income, we're able to do that with the rest, or if it's 80% or whatever the thing might be. But the point is, like, I don't want to get into the exact percentages other than this is a great rule for you to try to apply and challenge yourself with. Okay. And
it's a really good first thing to do to see yourself move forward.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so if we go back to Proverbs 21:20 in the Living Bible translation, it says, the wise man saves for the future, but the foolish man spends whatever he gets. And so like we have such clear instruction from the word about this. The foolish man spends whatever he gets.
Yeah.
The foolish man spends 100. And he's not even saying the foolish man spends 110% of his income like so many people are. He's saying just by spending everything you get, that's what the foolish man does. And so both of us, we're very good at spending more than everything we got and beyond. And so anyway, and on the contrast, the wise man saves for the future.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that is part of following this never 100 rule and making part of that saving. Okay. So let's give some, let's save and invest some.
And I will say with this rule, like there needs to be an accountability factor with it, because honestly, if we didn't have some checks and balances in place, I would still do this, even though I know not to. Does that make sense?
That's
so it's
the
like
system.
you don't have to depend on your willpower because my willpower honestly is not strong enough.
And I think
I'm
that's
just being honest.
But that's what's so beautiful about setting up the system.
Yeah.
And I say this all the time, like financially successful people aren't that way because of their discipline, because of their willpower. And that's what I always believed.
Surely there are some.
Well, there might be some, but the point is,
my younger sister is a great example of
the
that.
most financially successful people in the world, it's because they create systems that make the decisions for them.
Yeah.
They make the decision one time that makes all the rest of the decisions for them. So part of this is automation, which we've talked about and we'll continue to talk about. But this idea of automating the most important financial tasks so that you never have to think about it again and it starts happening for you automatically. And when left up to willpower, most people, the vast majority of people will fail. So it's not about having the willpower. It's not about that. It's about creating the system that is going to cause you to succeed, And that's why I think, especially for people like you who are a little bit more chase around the butterfly type, like this is incredibly important. And so for someone who is a little bit more disciplined,
spend the rent money is more, would be more accurate in this example. But yes, I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Is like I know myself well enough and I can admit that to myself. And honestly, it's a little bit funny that I am the person that is, here with Bob teaching finances and I can still see that in myself.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's okay. Use it to your advantage when the Lord is asking you to step out of the boat and do something that's a little bit scary. Like that's what that is good for me. Where it's like, I feel like we're supposed to give all of our money away to that person or, give our house away or whatever. I'm a lot more eager to jump and do some of that stuff because I have a little bit more of the spender mentality, I think. And so I think that actually is something that I can use to my advantage.
Yeah.
But it just has to stay in check.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. So I want to talk now about this janitor that we found out about. His name's Ronald Reed. And he spent his life working as a gas station attendant and a janitor, both what most people would assume fairly low paying jobs. And again, I don't really know. I just don't think, probably not super high income. And what's interesting about him is that by the end of his life, he had amassed an $8 million AUM.
It's crazy.
Okay. So
$8 million.
By contrast, you have some NBA players who are making $2, $3, $5 million a year who will retire and who will have zero to show for it. And yet this guy on a salary that most people think you are never going to be able to get ahead financially on a salary like that. And meanwhile, he not only does that, but is able to build an AUM up to $8 million. Yeah. And the way that he did this, is by following the Never 100 rule. It's that simple.
Yeah.
And he could have just as easily spent everything he talked about, like Proverbs 21:20 or whatever it was, talked about. He could have just as easily spent everything he had and had zero.
Right.
Or spent more and had debt when he died, like a ton of debt. Or he could have been the wise man that it talked about and saved for the future. And I mean, he did it really well. I don't know. He might have lived off 20% of his salary. I have no idea.
Yeah.
And we're not advocating for like a life of insane hyper frugality. Like that's not the point. It's just understanding that this is possible.
Right.
Because again, I did not know this was possible. I would have never in a million years thought this is possible, but it actually happened. And then again, like it's easy to listen to this and think, oh, that's an anomaly. That doesn't happen. Right. But I'm going to give you a couple more examples just to show you. Okay. So there's this guy named Leonard Gagowski. So he was a shopkeeper who had amassed a $13 million AUM. Grace Groner was a secretary her entire life, found herself with a $7 million AUM.
Wow.
Ann Scheiber, she apparently never made more than $4,000 in a single year, okay, but ended up with $22 million. I
mean, that one is just kind of insane.
And she was from the earlier part of the 20th century, but the numbers it's still $22 million. So her salary was that small. And she ended up with that. And again, she must have done some really good investing to be able to multiply it at that level.
Right.
But it doesn't matter. The point is just that this is possible. And it's good for us to know what is possible.
Yeah. Well, because we've talked about limiting beliefs before and how this can be one of those things where it's like, what does it matter?
Yeah.
What does it matter if I spend all I have or not? And it's like, well, it actually does matter because your finances are not all about you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing, but it's like there's so much that's possible, especially as believers when we are with God. Like when God is on our side, like it's amazing what can happen. And so, I mean, we tell these stories not because we're like wanting to point a finger and be like, you need to do this, but allow yourself to see beyond what you've already experienced or what your parents have told you or what,
everyone around
your
you
mentor has told you even, there can be things that are beyond that. Obviously, God is far beyond all humans. So let God show you what to do, and also if it's in the Bible, like we want to be doers of the word, right? So I think that's a wise place to start.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, I don't know what any of these guys, Leonard, Grace, Ann, did with their millions of dollars, but like, I want to be in that position where it's like, we got $22 million. What can we do for the kingdom? Like, that's what I want to be doing. Because again, the fact of the matter is Ann ended up with $22 million. She could have just as easily spent that $4,000 a year that she earned from her salary and justifiably felt like this is not that big of a salary. Of course I need to spend it all.
Yeah.
But she intentionally followed the wisdom of this verse, whether she realized it or not.
Right.
And as a result, this was a byproduct of that. And anyway, like I want to highlight this because like you said, the limiting belief there, that feeling of, it just doesn't matter. I don't have a big enough salary. I'm never going to be able to really do anything significant. I'd never be able to give away $1 million. Like, of course, that's impossible. Yeah. Like, that's what I want you to see beyond. I want you to see beyond. And again, especially in light of us being followers of Jesus and what is possible when God invades our finances.
Yeah, because like what's funny is like you've talked about before where you've been like, God, the math doesn't add up or whatever. And it's like God actually put the limit of math on us because he knew we needed some limits. Yeah. But he is unlimited. He created math so that our brains could figure things out, but he doesn't need it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like his math doesn't work the same as our math. And so, I mean, just keeping that perspective of how unlimited God is, that math rules don't apply to him.
Yep.
Yeah.
So talking about why this is important in terms of us, the series that we're in and this idea of this checklist of being able to give away $1 million. Again, like I think the mindset piece is the big part here because so much of us being able to reach that goal that again, like, if you're new to what we're doing, it's like that isn't something that we're congratulating ourselves for. That is by the grace of God, we are so thankful that he was able to do that through our finances. And he's the one who gets all the glory for it, but I think that is such a big part of it. Like just this idea of following this rule. I don't think it could have happened without, because even if God would have just been dumping money on us, but we would have been spending 100% of it, it's like, we're never going to get there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so that's the thing. It's like you have to be able to draw that line and say, this is the most I'm going to spend of what comes in.
Because we play a role. We have a part to play. Yeah. And cooperating with what God wants to do.
Yeah. So anyway, all that to say, as far as like your action steps now, what I want you to do is I want you to take a few minutes and just find out where you are on this. Find out what you're spending each month. What you're bringing in. Are you spending 100% of what comes in? And if you are, then it's okay. Let's figure out how to not do that. Let's figure out how to start moving forward, moving the wrong direction. If you're spending 105%, how do you roll that down closer to 100%? One tool that we've talked about a couple of different times on this podcast that we recommend using for this is a tool called rocketmoney.com. You can sign up for that, and they have a free version that's limited. And so you can do that for free and should be able to make some progress in this and be able to see kind of what your spending is. And then if you want to get the paid version, you can or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's not sponsored or anything. I happen to like the product. That's all.
We just like it.
Yeah. So, and if you are successfully doing this, that's great. But like, how can you do it better? you know? So if you're successfully spending 90% of your income, or maybe 85 or whatever the thing might be, how can you increase that, widen that gap to be able to make more progress forward, whether that's through more giving, more saving, more investing? Because that's part of what we're trying to do. It's like, how do we increase that gap between what we're earning and what we're spending? And that's how you can really start making a lot of forward progress.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
anyway, that's what we have for you today. Hopefully you find this helpful. Share it with someone who needs it in your life.
Yeah.
This is a great episode too to share with, I don't know, any older teenagers, young 20s. Like, this is something that, like, if you get this from an early age, you know, if you're listening to this, that it would make all the difference in the world if you can get this right from an early age. So, pass this along to your kids. And we will see you in the next episode.
See ya. You want some more Bob and Linda in your life? How about this?
Of course.
How would you like to hang out with us for 6 weeks and your small group or church?
And if you want to do that, just go to seedtime.com/true to find out more details, or send us a message, DM on Instagram at SeedTime, and let's chat.